Hello everyone and welcome back to Menlo-Atherton High School's Aequora video series. My name is Cate and today we will be talking about Rome. Here's a picture of the Colosseum, big famous place in Rome. We're going to start off with talking about what is Rome. You might recognize the name, it's a pretty big city. Today we know Rome as the capital of Italy, this boot-shaped country right here. And Rome is known as a beautiful city of lots of history and art and great stuff. But Rome used to not be just considered a city, but Rome was a huge empire. As we can see here, it extends past just Italy and past just where Rome is right around there, but it covered a lot of parts of Europe, parts of what is now Africa, and it was really a huge empire. It was one of the largest in the ancient world, as you can see from this picture, and it covered at one point 1.9 million square miles. That's absolutely huge. Again, Roman Empire, very, very big. During that time, actually, 1 out of every 5 people on Earth lived in the Roman Empire. That just tells you how huge this place was. But how did the empire even get to this stage? Well, there were a lot of battles fought. You can see the Romans really loved their battles, super big on that. But we're not going to talk about how Rome got to the place it was today. Instead, we're going to talk about the origin of Rome today. And the origin of Rome, the stories around it come from mythology or stories. Roman mythology was made up of a bunch of legends, which means that they're not 100% historically accurate, but the Roman people believed in these stories, and they passed down these stories through their families. So, the story surrounding the origin of Rome was one about Romulus and Remus. And this story tells the tale of 2 boys, one named Romulus, one named Remus. Now, you might recognize the name Romulus sounds a little similar to Rome, so keep that in mind while we go. That will loop back around at the end. Before we keep going on how Romulus and Remus founded Rome and how that even ties in, how their story ties into Rome being founded, something to keep in mind is that in the city of Rome, there are 7 hills. You don't need to know all their names, but you can see there's Aventine Hill, Palatine Hill, all these hills. Here's just a little visual of them, and keep this in the back of your head, and I will ask a question about the hills later, so just remember 7 hills of Rome. Okay, let's get into the story. It all starts right here, with Romulus and Remus. Now, their parents were Sylvia, and Mars. Mars, if you recognize his name, is the Roman god of war. Now, Silva was the daughter of a king, as you can see here. And when her father died, her uncle decided to take over the kingdom. And when her uncle took over the kingdom, it became pretty clear pretty fast that the uncle was not a big fan of Romulus and Remus. In fact, when the uncle took over the kingdom, he ordered Romulus and Remus to be taken away. And not just taken away, he wanted them thrown into the Tiber River, which is right here. And this river looks pretty deep. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a pretty good swimmer, and that still seems a little scary. And he wanted to throw these newborn kids in there. So he orders a servant to throw them into the Tiber River. Pretty scary stuff. Everyone thought they wouldn't make it. But the servant decides to spare their lives and puts them in a basket, just like this, and then puts the basket in the Tiber River. So they do end up going in the river, but they're in a basket, so they actually make it pretty far, even though this river is extremely long. While they're, just hanging out on this river, going down, the river god of the Tiber River, his name is Tiberinus, ring any bells, actually calmed the river to make sure that the babies were safe, and they caused the basket to get caught on a tree branch right before this swamp that was coming up so that they could stop right under the Palatine Hill. Remember the hills? They were stopping right about here, and the river god made sure that they were able to rest on this tree and then get to the riverbed where they were able to come onto the land right around this area right here. And what happened was they were found in the wild by a wolf named Lupa, who actually decided to take care of them and kept them safe, gave them milk, and raised them for a little while. Imagine, if any of you have a dog, imagine if your dog had been kind of like your mom when you were a little kid. Isn't that crazy? But it happened in the myth, and Lupa raised the kids until one day 2 shepherds with really long names, Acca Laurentia and Faustulus, found them in the wild, and they decided to raise them and take them up as kids. You can see some pictures. If you don't know what a shepherd is, they're basically people who tend to sheep and oftentimes live in the mountains. So they were raised by these shepherds for most of their life until one day they ran into some other shepherds. Now, do you remember the king who sent them to be in the Tiber River, who didn't think, he wanted them to be thrown away into the Tiber River? Well, he had some shepherds too, and one day Romulus and Remus meet up with the shepherds of King Romulus, who is the king who wanted them in the Tiber River, and they get into this huge fight, and Remus gets taken by these shepherds and gets taken to a prison cell in the king's palace. And as a result, Romulus ends up getting all of his shepherd friends, freeing Remus, and then, as they're leaving, they actually end up attacking the king as well, and they kill the king while they leave. So they get Remus out of the prison, they end up being able to get rid of the king, and they are successful and happy. But since the king is dead, now what happens is everyone wants to crown Romulus and Remus as the king, but they don't want to rule over the place where someone used to hate them. That doesn't sound like much fun. So instead, they want to rule their own city. Remember, they grew up in that area around Rome, so they want to rule their own city in that area, and that city will become Rome. So, they want to rule Rome. But the problem is, there's 2 brothers, and Rome is a pretty big place. Also, remember the 7 hills? Well, they each had a preference, which means they each had a favorite hill that they wanted to go on. And they had so many arguments about these hills, and they just could not decide which hill they wanted the city to be on. Eventually, Romulus decides that he wants the Palatine Hill, which is right here, and Remus decides he wants the Aventine Hill. So, what they do to settle it is they stand on their hills and they watch for birds. Isn't that crazy? Why would you go do that? Imagine if every single time you had an argument with someone, you went and stood outside and watched for birds. But it was a different time. This is what they did. Birds were seen as signs. So if you saw a certain number of birds, it could be lucky or unlucky. So that's exactly what they do. Romulus stands here and Remus stands here. Now what happens is super tricky. Remus sees 6 birds on the Aventine Hill before Romulus sees any. But Romulus ends up seeing 12 birds on Palatine Hill, and he thinks that he should win because he saw more birds. But Remus thinks that he should win because he saw birds first. They really had a very bad argument about this, even though it might sound a little silly, just how many birds you've seen. But this was such a big problem that Romulus decides to build walls around his city. Just like the ones we see here, these are some Roman walls. He decides to fortify, which means protect his city, and he just wants to start up his city right here without his brother. He doesn't need his brother. His brother doesn't want to be on his hill, so he decides to start building his city. And Remus, who is now working alone, is kind of poking fun at Romulus. You know when you tease your siblings and they get really mad? That's what they're kind of doing. And this escalates really fast, and they end up getting into this huge fight, and Remus actually ends up dying. So Romulus now is the only brother left, and he has already started building his city. So he built his city on the Palatine Hill, built his walls, and the city becomes Rome, just like his name, Romulus, Rome. And Romulus named the city after himself and established a government and laws, just like most countries have. The population grew pretty quickly, and Romulus became the first king of Rome. So that's the beginning of Rome. 2 brothers, some wolves, and a river, and here we have this huge city. It seems crazy, but after Romulus was king, 6 more people served as king of Rome. And eventually this system of having kings and queens, which is called a monarchy, was overthrown, and Rome was turned into a republic, where 2 people called consuls ruled. And after that, the empire was established, and around that time, Rome reached its height. Just like we talked about earlier, Rome grew super quickly. So that's a pretty brief history of Rome and how it came to be. Pretty crazy story. But thank you for watching this video and wanting to learn about the story of Romulus and Remus. Please stay tuned for more videos coming, and as always, keep learning about mythology and Roman history, and have a nice day. Bye!